Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. It is your boy, the Horrorlander, and happy Easter to everybody who celebrates. I do not celebrate Easter, but I know a lot of you guys are out with family right now, having some good time. So make sure you spend some quality time with your loved ones, relax, enjoy. And I thought that since it's a quiet weekend, I might as well give you what's prompted to be, which is my monthly reading wrap up. Now, I started this last month, starting with what I read through February and January, because basically I've never done reading wrap ups. I usually don't do them. I usually didn't care about doing them, but I decided I might as well because a lot of the different books and stuff that I read, I don't necessarily review it or cover it or make it into a video, sometimes until way later. So I know sometimes people are asking me, like, hey, what have you read? Like, have you read this? Have you read that? So this is kind of a way for me to give you guys an update. Of course, I am on Goodreads. My name is Shiv the Horrorlander on Goodreads. There's a link from my first video that I can include in the comments if you want to follow me. But this will essentially be me taking stuff that I logged or didn't log on my Goodreads and then making it into video format. I'll just be giving you guys brief thoughts about each book that I cover. So yeah, don't expect any thorough reviews. And this doesn't exclude any of these books from getting a review or making it to a video later on. This is kind of just like a progress check. And so far, this month of March 2026, I read 17 books that I logged. And since I've read 3 more books since this first week of April, that makes effectively a total of 50 books that I read so far this year. So I'm happy with that. That's a good progress check. And of course, with life and work, it's not always going to be consistent, but I think so far I've been doing pretty good in terms of reading often. And that's just been my goal, to read more this year. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get into covering all the books, because while talking about them is fun, finding all the covers is not easy. So, I got some work to do, but let's get started. So, the first book that I read in March 2026, I'm going to be looking off to the side because my list of all my books is right here. The first one I read was Nightcrawlers by Tim Curran. This one was essentially about a group of police officers who make it to this kind of rural area of farmland where the farm people and townsfolk have found these bones of cadavers and corpses that are being unearthed from the ground itself that they're working on. And the corpses, the bones, look like they've been feasted upon, they've been cannibalized. So there's some strange mystery going on. And eventually the police officers start unraveling a mystery as to there might be some otherworldly threats that are, infesting this area, these woods underneath the ground. And then the police officers end up getting caught in it. And you find out that a meteor crashed down, many years ago and maybe started infecting the land on some color out of space from Lovecraft stuff. And there are some subterranean cannibal entity crawler things that start, erupting from the ground and attacking people. And then the police officers have to go down into the ground to take them down. So it was a very gory book. It was a very disturbing book with some good action sequences and some really disturbing and gross visuals later on. I forgot what I gave this. I think I gave it like a decent. I thought this was a decent or like pretty, or I forgot. I think I gave it like a pretty good or good. I thought it was a fun read. I thought it was enjoyable. It had a lot of disturbing stuff in it. Didn't really impress me as one of his best ones, but I still had a good time. Next one I read was Goosebumps, One Night at Camp Bigfoot, which is the most recent House of Shivers book to come out. Obviously made a whole review for it, so all of you Goosebumps and kids horror fans and interested people, you can go check out my full review on this. But I thought One Night at Camp Bigfoot was a good book, mild good. Basically about a group of siblings who end up going to this summer camp, which is themed around Bigfoot because the first camp they wanted to go to had some problems, a bear infestation. And when they get to the Camp Bigfoot camp, they realize that there's a guy named Uncle Squatch, the camp counselor, who's going to be hosting kind of a manhunt for Bigfoot. People are going to go hunting after Bigfoot, try to find him. So then they decide to participate. And, is Bigfoot real? Is it a hoax? What's the truth behind what's going on? It gets pretty crazy, and it had a wild climax with good action, but a twist that didn't have much explanation. So, yeah, that one was mild good. The next book I read was Spine Tinglers by R.L. Stine. I always have a habit, I want to call it Spine Tinglers because Spine Tinglers is a kids' horror series from the 90s. Stein Tinglers, it's like a series of short story collections by R.L. Stein. They kind of feel along the lines of something like Tales to Give You Goosebumps, but instead of rebooting Tales to Give You Goosebumps, they decided to make it its own thing. This short story collection was decent. It was kind of mid. I don't remember a lot of it. A lot of it is just kind of forgettable. The ones that I do remember is like the first story was about like a kid who's in like a Groundhog Day situation after a new watch he gets breaks, and there's like kids who are stuck in like a parallel dimension on some Twilight Zone stuff. There was the last story, which was like I think The Monster Maker, and I think it was supposed to be like an original story from like a magazine called The Homemade Monster, where a kid loves building monsters and loves making like monster figurines, and he ends up getting this special set which comes in with like its own AI chip and other stuff. And when he starts building it, it might start coming alive and causing problems. Uh, yeah, I'm trying to recall if there's like any other stories that pop up in my head, but no, a lot of them were forgettable. Oh, there's like one kid who wants to be like famous or be like a Hollywood star, and he ends up finding a book which is like how to change your life, and the book allows him to change his life, which was really stupid. Yeah, I can't remember much else. I'll have to look through the collection to remember all the different stories and jog my memory. But yeah, other than that, I don't remember. Oh, and there's one about a kid who gets like stuck in a haunted house, and it's like a future situation. Like he heard a kid screaming in the haunted house, and then he finds out that maybe that haunted house was recording the future of what was going to happen to maybe him. Yeah, it's a forgettable collection. Wasn't really that great. And I heard the next books are like even more forgettable. So I don't know, Stein. I don't know about this Stein Tingler series. Maybe you should just focus on Tales to Give You Goosebumps and on quality, because yeah, they're not that memorable. But either way, that's Stein Tinglers. The next one was the latest Frightland book I read. I have like two left after this. I read Frightland, Why I Don't Sleep on Feather Beds, and this was a very good kids' horror story. It's basically about some kids who are spending time with their aunt out in this farmland. They're basically kind of reluctant to go because there's not going to be technology or stuff to do, and they have to help around the farm. And she's a very country lady. But when they get there, they start realizing that there is this urban legend, which is not an urban legend, a situation where a meteor from outer space had crashed down into the farmland and maybe started infecting some stuff, maybe started causing some problems. Livestock that went around the meteor would die, and maybe things are getting infected. So again, a color out of space situation. There's some situation with the main character who sleeps in the attic, and something in his feather bed because of that infection thing. And you get some very disturbing, creepy, freaky monsters that are in the story. And you get an awesome secondary villain which comes in. And yeah, a lot of good action, a lot of good creature feature stuff. This one very much felt like if you took, you know, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill from the first Creepshow movie and you mixed it with Egg Monsters from Mars and kind of amped up the Egg Monsters from Mars aspect, that's what you sort of get with Why I Don't Sleep on Feather Beds. So very good book. Shout out to R.H. Grimley. I really enjoyed this, and again reinforces why you should support all these indie authors and lesser known guys who are coming out with kids horror, because oftentimes at this stage they're doing a lot better stuff than the modern Goosebumps and mainstream kids horror movies that are coming out. So is what it is. Next one was Bone Chillers, The Dog Ate My Homework. This is a really weird story. It's basically about a girl who has a habit of lying. She's a habitual liar. And she ends up logging onto the computer because it's the 90s, so it's like a boot up computer. And she ends up getting into this chat room where there's this entity, like an electronic entity, which starts encouraging her to lie and starts providing her certain ridiculous lies to just say and say with faith to, you know, other students, to people in her class, and eventually her two friends who also like lying, they also start, you know, entering this chat room with her and kind of checking it out. And they find out that every single lie that they say ends up coming true, but it can't be reversed. So it's like a be careful what you wish for kind of thing. She wants lies that can, you know, actually come true, lies that could be the truth, and that's what ends up happening. And it gets pretty crazy. This one was a decent book. I enjoyed it more than I expected because there is a thing about one of the lies in the climax or right before it is about They're trying to lie that school is going to be out forever, like the school that they go to. And the way that it's done in a be careful what you wish for situation is a giant swarm of humongous termites start rampaging across the school, eating it apart, and start chasing kids and all this stuff. Very disturbing, and the termites keep getting larger and larger as they unearth from the ground and start tearing apart the school, and then they start tearing apart the neighborhood. It reminded me of one of my favorite Tim Curran horror stories called Migration, which was from Alien Horrors, which had to do a swarm of killer insects. And it very much had a similar type of vibe of just a huge insect swarm, unnatural, crazy, chaotic. So, yeah. But this book was decent because there's literally like no explanation given as to like, or good reasoning given as to why these lies are coming to life, why this stuff is happening, what is the deal with the entity. It's very vague. And that's kind of a thing with Bone Chillers. They don't really explain much, and that kind of takes you away like, okay, yeah, this cool shit is happening, this random shit's happening, but at the same time, like, why? And they're just like, man, just roll with it. So, yeah, I have to take off points for that. But it was a decent read. Next one was Spine Tingler's Blood Red 8 Ball. I thought this one was pretty bad. This Spine Tingler's book is about a kid who loves playing video games, and he ends up getting this video game that ends up at his doorstep because his neighbor is a video game developer who's very secretive but claims that he's one of the best video game developers. And when this kid ends up opening it up, even though he doesn't know, maybe he's not supposed to, he ends up putting it into his TV and watching it and starts to play the game, and he ends up getting transported. And it's called like Blood Red 8 Ball, I believe. I forgot the name of it, but I think that's what it is. Where he basically is a small little kid on this huge pool table, and the pool balls are going all over the place trying to hit him. And there's this blood red 8 ball, which is like pulsating like a heart and is like trying to come after him. And then he ends up in like a dystopian, cartoonish, warped version of his neighborhood. And then he'll like get transported to different parts of his life. Like if he eats mashed potatoes for dinner and he plays a game, he'll land in a giant plate of mashed potatoes. It's a really random and weird ass story. The scenes with the 8 balls is cool, but they get very repetitive very quick. The logic behind all this different stuff happening of where he just gets like transported to different places, just random shit and random, crap happening throughout the game and the levels. And the whole reason as to why this is happening is never explained. The villain is never explained. There's like minor hints. It's never built up to. And it's almost like they were sequel baiting. And it's like, dude, there's not going to be a sequel. So, why the fuck are you not explaining why any of this shit is happening? So it was just a random what the fuck book. And I feel like it didn't deliver on that front. So I think I gave it like a 4.5 out of 10, pretty bad. I did not enjoy that one. I was having a hard time getting through that book. And if you give me a hard time getting through a kid's horror book, which is 140 pages long, keeping in mind that I've read 700-page long adult horror novels, 600-page, 500-page, 400-page, you're kind of doing a shitty job. Not gonna lie to you. So that was that Bone Chillers one. Bone Chillers. Spine Tinglers one. I'm already losing track. Next one was an adult horror book. I read The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. This book got adapted into the iconic and famous Hellraiser movie and sparked the Hellraiser franchise. Never seen any of the movies. Never seen the first one either. But I know about this book, so that's why I picked it up and decided to read it. And it's very short. It's like a novella. And the pages like on the copy that I read, like they're not that much, words per page. So it's a pretty quick read. Hellbound Heart is about this guy who's effectively like a sinner. He likes drinking, he likes partying, and he's a womanizer. He's really obsessed with getting with all the hottest women that he wants to, adultery and all that stuff. But he's effectively at a point of like depression. He feels like he's experienced all the worldly pleasures that he wanted to, and he's searching for otherworldly pleasures, next level desires and pleasures, which obviously, if you've read any scriptural story, doesn't matter what religion you follow, if you've read any scriptural story, being that obsessed with desires often gets you into any version of hell or demons. And that's what ends up happening. He ends up getting this very intricate puzzle box, that he starts kind of opening up and figuring out how to unlock, very Eastern Asian kind of, style. As he does it, he realizes that he's getting closer and closer to summoning these demons, which I believe are named the Xenobites. And the Xenobites are basically masters of pleasure, right? It's kind of hinted that they're former victims of the box who get turned into demons obsessed with pleasure, and he ends up doing some very pagan type of demonic rituals, not just pagan, but demonic rituals involving offerings and stuff. And it gets quite creepy and eerie throughout the story as he has this special shrine room where there's no light that has to be entered into the room. So he tapes shut all the blinds and makes sure everything's covered. And when the demons come, he realizes that they are masters of pleasure, but not in the worldly aspect. They experience pleasure through a very sensory mechanism, like all of your senses firing off. And matter of fact, pain is a good way to trigger senses and get those pleasures in their eyes. And they're very deformed. They got all types of scarring and, chains pulling back their mouths so their teeth are showing, chains pulling open their eyelids so they don't blink. Very disfigured and freaky and, weird. And they end up deciding to take him and torture him. And he ends up getting trapped in their pocket dimension, tortured for a long time, and kind of slowly turned into a Xenobite. And eventually his brother and his wife moves into the apartment after the brother, the main character, goes missing. And the wife apparently cheated on the brother with this main character who got trapped inside the box in the realm. And eventually, after some freak accidents, he ends up basically in a very ghostly, supernatural fashion connecting to the wife and convincing her to bring him human sacrifices in order for him to slowly escape the Xenobite realm, escape from the box, and materialize back into the real world. And it turns into a whole situation where a bunch of different characters' mistakes leads it all to one big climax. So yeah, this is a good book. I liked it. It's very creepy, very atmospheric. I have to say it kind of left me with a little bit to desire. I wanted more of the Xenobite stuff. I wanted more lore about the Xenobites. I know there's other, sequels and stuff that I can go into, but I was wishing more for the first book because they're the most interesting part of the book. The rest of it is like internal drama and stuff. And, for how disturbing the Xenobites are and for all the creepy stuff that Clive Barker I've read from a few of his short stories able to do, I feel like it kind of under-delivered. I wanted more action, more, creepy stuff in there, more disturbing visuals. But as it is, it was a mild good one. Next one is a kid's horror book, Strange Matter, Fly the Unfriendly Skies. Basically about these kids who are on an airplane that gets hijacked. There is two different UFOs, which is in aerial combat in the sky, and end up basically firing at each other and attacking while all the passengers are freaking out in the plane. And the wing of the plane gets cut off, and then the plane gets paralyzed, frozen in the air. And the kids end up getting abducted by some aliens, very, big gray-headed small men kind of aliens. But then they find out that, are these really the good guys, or like, are these the bad guys, or these good guys? They're debating like, what these type of aliens really are, what's their motive. And then they find an enemy group of aliens. And the enemy group of aliens is like one of the most like creative aliens that I've ever seen in kids horror, where they're essentially these giant floating sentient balls of black water, right? And they're able to explode out in like tidal waves. They're able to squeeze and swell up and shoot out pressurized jet streams of water to cut through and break apart walls. They hunt like sharks. Instead of sensing vibrations in the water, they sense vibrations in the air in order to hunt. And they can pour water down people's eyes and infect them like a parasite, which ends up turning other people into these floating sentient balls of black water. And you get UFO combat in the air, and it's very cinematic. This was a very good read. I enjoyed it a lot. It was a very good one. I think I gave it like an 8.8 out of 10. Really, really enjoyed it. Very cinematic. Again, some of the best alien stuff that I read, which Strange Matter seems to consistently deliver on. So shout out to Marty Engel and Johnny Barnes. The only thing that took it away is that I feel like you jump right into the action. You don't get much buildup. You don't get much in terms of study on the characters. It kind of gets explained why that's not the case, but as with any Strange Matter book, I always want more with the characters. I want more exploration and stuff, and more setup just to kind of work into it. But, it's reoccurring characters, so what can you do? Next one was Bumps in the Night, Nostalgic Nightmare. The next Bumps in the Night book I read. I thought this one was okay. I wasn't too big of a fan of it. I liked the concept, but I feel like it kind of resorted too much to certain things I was expecting. Nostalgic Nightmare is about some kids who their parents have a freak accident, a car accident, which makes them realize how short life is, how volatile life is, and the parents decide that they want to live back to their glory days, which was the 90s. So they start transforming their house into like everything from the 90s gimmicks, and they figure out a way, which I think is called like mental voyage. It's like a French method of like astral travel where you can transport yourself back into time using your mind. It says it's a French method, but I'm a practicing Hindu. I'm a faithful Hindu. I know, I don't know all the scriptures. Our scriptures are long, but I know about spiritual yoga and all the different ways that we worship. Astral projection and travel is kind of our thing. We kind of are always like very much believing in that. So when I saw that concept, I was like, okay, that's really cool. Like, being able to astral time travel and stuff like that, like, where the story's going to go with it. But of course, because it's a 90s bait thing, they're trying to do all this so they can get back to the 90s. And eventually they end up taking kids to this off the books, off the radar, strange kind of amusement park called the Retro Rad Zone, which is focused around all different 90s gimmicks. And eventually the kids start to suspect that, when there's some rotting food that's literally from the 90s inside of their little house that they're staying in, then the parents are acting like nothing's happened because they got these like 3D glasses which make everything look, wonderful. They suspect that something's really off with this amusement park, and then the story unfolds from there. It was a really cool concept about astral time travel, but I'm not gonna lie, it got too overboard, overdosing with the 90s nostalgia bait. Listen, I'm nostalgic. I was born in the Y2K era. So all of that 90s stuff, the late 90s stuff especially, still trickled in throughout the beginning of the 2000s when I was growing up until like 2011 is when like stuff really stopped altogether. But yeah, I feel like it's overdosing on it. It's relying too much on it. And the way the story got was a little too large scale, and it got too large scale at the very end when the story was wrapping up. And then it ends on an abrupt, dark ending that I don't feel was justified. I don't think it was earned. I feel like you kind of just like lean it. It's kind of just like ran into it without really setting up any type of back and forth or, this was one of the cases I felt like the book almost felt like it was cut short. And I didn't like that. So yeah, it's a cool concept. I feel like you could use, astral time travel for other stuff, like going back to like the Wild West or becoming a pirate or some cool stuff, and like, go about that theme where it's like, okay, yes, time travel is cool, the idea of going back to the past, but you don't know how the past really is, that kind of thing. Here it was more so kind of like a warning about like, don't live too much in the past. But it was mostly a 90s overdose, so I wasn't too big a fan. So I gave it like a 6 out of 10. Okay. Next one is Spine Tingler's Pet Store. This is a fucking horrible kids horror book. One of the worst, one of the most brain dead, brain rotted kids horror books. I've been going a little bit too heavy into the plots right now, so let me keep it short because I can make a separate review. It's about these kids who their parents and the dad ends up getting a new job, and he goes to a place called Wolfsburg where he's supposed to do security, and the whole place is run by dogs. Literally, the whole town's run by dogs. They got these collars which read out like electronic text, which is them speaking. And humans there are getting like put on leashes and fed in doggy bowls and put into dog houses and treated like dogs. And the parents just fucking roll with it the whole story. The parents don't decide, hey, let's leave, hey, let's spare the kids. They just like idiots keep rolling with it and acting like everything's okay, and the whole story is just a bunch of goofy dog puns and dog gimmicks and a bunch of stupid shit, and then it recontextualizes Bigfoot. Bigfoot comes in and is a recontextualization about maybe some people who escaped Wolfsburg. This is a horrible book. It's like a 3 out of 10, very bad. This thing is fucking suck. I might even give it like a 2 out of 10. This shit's awful. But yeah, this is a very bad book, and it's one of the most painful, mind-numbing, lobotomizing kids' horror books to read through. So fuck this thing. Next one was actually a comic, Super Creepshow issue 1. This is Creepshow's superhero comic issue debut. It was decent. It was okay. The first one is basically like a Spider-Man riff. It's about a teenager gets bit by a mutant spider and then ends up transforming into like an arachnid monster hybrid. And maybe his girlfriend is into that, and they get transformed together, and it gets a little gory, but it was okay. Another one is about a speedster who gets a ring that he puts on, and he's able to be super speedy, and then maybe he's not able to take off the ring, and it just gets weird. It was okay. Both these stories were okay. I didn't think too highly of them. Like at max, the first one's decent. The other one I thought was, okay, but kind of teetering on like, I don't know if I like that. So yeah, not too impressed by that. Next one was the EC Catacomb of Torment #9. I got this because of Joe R. Lansdale pictures in there. Story. I said picture because his story is about pictures. One of the first story by Joe R. Lansdale is like Picture Ready or something. It's about a couple who's out on a getaway and they end up going to this pawn shop place to try to get like a nice Polaroid camera, and then they may end up robbing the place and killing the owner. But little do they know that the owner might have some supernatural abilities and might be haunting them through the Polaroid camera appearing and maybe getting them into a little bit of trouble, a little bit of accidents, and maybe is able to spread to other people with that Polaroid camera haunting it. And he was aura farming. That old man in the story, he was aura farming. I like the story, it was pretty good, so I enjoyed that. The other one was really horrible. It was about some like some deep web chat room thing where they just like torture and harass people through their cameras and just set up their life in shitty ways, and then the guy in there ends up getting targeted. It was really fucking dumb and edgy and incel. I hated that one. And then the last one I forgot. Oh, the last one was about like a woman who wants to be eternally young because she's a famous Hollywood actress. She starts taking some skincare routines and other stuff. And there's a recontextualization about why she's able to stay forever young. And I actually quite liked that one. I thought it was good. Felt like a Tales from the Crypt episode idea, so I enjoyed it. And I wasn't expecting the twist. In hindsight, I should have been like, I should have expected it, but in the moment, I was like, oh, it's a nice twist. Next one, now we're closing the home stretch. We have Santa's Dark Legacy by James Powell. This one is a kid's horror book by indie author James Powell. Basically about a kid who, is kind of been acting bad around the house, giving problems to his mother and sister because the father ended up passing away. Or I forgot if it was passing away or the father left. I'm not sure. Maybe the father left. The father's not in his life, so he's taking it out on his family. And they're spending time with the grandpa during Christmas. And the grandpa warns him that if you don't start behaving better, if you don't start cleaning up your act, he tells him an urban legend that he may or may not have experience with, which is that Santa has an evil twin brother who lives in the South Pole. And it's almost like a Krampus situation, but he clarifies it's not Krampus. It's his evil twin brother who finds kids, steals their presents, and then maybe causes some problems to them. So he very much is giving them like a fairy tale type of warning, saying don't act the way you are and stop it and continue it, otherwise he's going to pay you a visit. And then the kid decides, well, if he thinks that it's so true, let me, I've been trying to catch proof of Santa and maybe capture Santa for a long time since I was, a few years younger. Let me try to get, images of this guy if he shows up. And he tries to call, the grandpa's bluff and, wants to get evidence for himself because he still kind of believes in Santa. And he may end up encountering the entity, which is from the urban legend. And there's a twist. It's a little different, but I really liked it. It's fun. The villain is horrific, lots of fun, very creepy, very comical, comic nature kind of villain. And I really love this book, man. It was a great book. It was a great read, and I really enjoyed it. So go check out Santa's Dark Legacy. Next one was House of Fear, Volume 1 by James Powell. Again, I was on a James Powell kick after that Santa Dark Legacy. This is a graphic. It's like the Attack of the Killer Snowman and other stories. It's like a little graphic novel that's supposed to be Tales from the Crypt for kids horror. And this was really fun, man. The artwork is great. The first one is about some kids who end up meeting this other guy who claims that he might be magical. And after they have like a snowball fight and they're having fun and they're ignoring the shy kid, the snowmen start coming to life and they get into a situation with an ice monster and have to fight it in a lot of fun ways. The other one is about some kids who have a camp out. A group of kids go camping with each other because there's an urban legend around the woods that there was a basically train that was carrying a creature that was supposed to be deposited into an aquarium, a radioactive fish hybrid thing that may have broken out and is now wandering the woods and causing trouble. There was a fantastic, and I mean a perfect, kids horror story that has to deal with the Tooth Fairy, about a girl who ends up like stealing and hiding her brother's teeth because she's jealous that he's getting more money than she is from the Tooth Fairy, and she ends up finding out what the Tooth Fairy actually is, and it's horrifying. It is terrifying seeing what the Tooth Fairy is, and then they have to set up a way to take down the Tooth Fairy, and there's a twist at the end which kind of hinted something earlier. So yeah, overall really fun book. Few of the stories were okay, kind of misses the last one, and there's one about like leaves which was way too short. But overall, this was a fun time, and I wish Goosebumps and other kids' horror did stuff like this. So yeah, that's House of Fear Volume 1. Next one, my last James Powell one I read, is The Wishing Stone by James Powell. It's about a girl who's obsessed with prosthetics and makeup, and she's excited for Halloween night when she can dress herself up, get a nice costume. But her older sisters are giving her a hard time. They're older. They're getting to, I think they're in high school, and they basically rag on her and make fun of her. And the mother oftentimes isn't able to spend enough time with the daughter, so she feels ignored. And she's taking care of this old woman who lives across from this haunted house because the old woman got injured. And as she's taking care of it, the older lady may end up taking her to the haunted house and finding an object. And that object may be a wishing stone that, when in contact with water, is able to grant wishes. And it ends up being a be careful what you wish for. There's a really fun Halloween gimmick themed monster that has some fun action sequences and a few disturbing scenes in the climax. But again, the idea of not explaining why certain stuff happens. So I still thought this was a damn good book, but I feel like it could have been great if we just had more explanation. Second to last book I read was Orphans by Ed Naha. This is a vintage horror paperback that I read. I know Ed Naha was responsible for some good horror movies back in the day. That's what one of my fellow reviewers told me. Orphans by Ed Naha is about this lady who is a school teacher in New York City, and she ends up getting invited to this small town America kind of place a few hours away to be a teacher for this small school of special kids. And when she gets there, she finds out that maybe these kids might not be all that they seem. They might be otherworldly. They may have supernatural strength, intelligence, cunning, and abilities. And she sees some shadowy entities at night that are kidnapping kids and causing problems and committing, violent murders and stuff. And she quickly realizes that there's something off about these kids and something strange is going on in this town. And she may have been invited on purpose for some greater goal. So it ends up being a situation where she's trapped in and has to figure out the mystery and find out how to save the kids and also protect herself from the kids and the other entities. So yeah, this was an out there story when you find out what actually happens towards the climax, but it was fun. If you're a fan of kids horror, I think this is a good adult horror book for you to check out. Obviously, kids are in there and they're the main focus. The reveal as to what's really going on, again, is out there, but it's fun because it recontextualizes some of the things that have been going on in the town, and it gets quite crazy, and it gets quite violent, and it gets quite disturbing as to something that's potentially going to happen. So overall, this was a good book. I enjoyed it, like an 8.4 out of 10. But I think that the first half of the book was a little slow. I kind of wish more stuff was going on. I wish we got more direct action, maybe introducing some of the actual reveals and stuff earlier so we can flesh it out and spend more time with it and it feels more satisfying. I feel like the main bulk hot stuff was saved towards like the very last part of the book, like the last 25-30%. And I didn't feel like I got to spend enough time with it, as it kind of just felt like it's going, back and forth with the momentum. So yeah, but overall, still a good read. And the final book that I read in March, wrapping up this March read up, is Goosebumps Deep Trouble 2. I read Goosebumps Deep Trouble 2, basically following Billy Deep and Dr. Deep and the family from the first book. And this time they end up running into these supersized creatures. They realize that all the aquatic creatures around them in the ocean, the sharks, the seagulls, the crabs, and, their goldfish, which is on board, a snail, which is on board, end up supersizing. And they suspect it might be this strange plankton, which is around the ocean where they're at on the boat, that might be supersizing these animals. And they get into a lot of creature feature action. And then you find out that it might be actually some scientific experiment stuff going on, and they might find out who the villain really is behind what's happening. This was a good book. I enjoyed it. I like all the marine, aquatic horror, creature feature action with supersized animals. There's some cool stuff with the jellyfish that happens, stuff with some seagulls. And overall, I thought it was a fun time, but I think the book has a little bit too fast pacing. You go from point A to point B very, very quickly. And on top of that, the villain makes a really stupid decision at the end. And I mean, really dumb. So it's kind of hard to take it seriously. So with those corrections, I think this could have been a lot better. But as it is, I still had a fun time. And that is the 17 books. I think 17. Let me do a quick count right now. I got an Excel thing. Yeah. All right, 17 books that I read this month. So yeah, if you guys are interested in any of these books, I suggest you go check them out. Even if my reviews are not that highly of them, maybe you might think differently. And again, if you want to go follow me on Goodreads, go ahead. I'm on there, Shiv the Horrorlander. And stay tuned for the next month reading wrap-up that's going to come up for the end of April. Again, these are variable. It depends how busy I am. I might be getting busy towards end of April and onward, so I might be reading less books, but I'll try to get in whatever I can. But enjoy your Easter weekend, have a great rest of the day, and stay tuned for when the next content drops. Deuces.